I feel as though this video needs an additional introduction because several months ago I did a recipe, a tagine, Moroccan stew, that was supposed to use lamb shanks, but I couldn't find lamb shanks anywhere and I would have had to special order them. So I did the recipe using lamb meat from a leg of lamb. Well, in the meantime, a friend of mine called. He found lamb shanks in a store down in the city. So I purchased the lamb shanks and I set about to do this recipe over again, this time with real lamb shanks, the way it was supposed to be done in the first place. So although it's a duplication of something I did earlier, this time I'm doing it the right way, the way I wanted to do it originally. So that explains why I'm doing this twice. You don't need a luxury kitchen to prepare gourmet meals. I wanted a little on the sticky side. With a modest kitchen and some standard equipment, you can cook food that you would be proud to serve. There is my shrimp. All you need is a few helpful kitchen techniques, the ability to follow a recipe, a passion for food, and a fascination with cooking. Just follow along the rib cage. That is so good. My name is Dennis. I really do live in a mobile home, in a trailer park, and this is my kitchen. Today, I want to return to, finally, my Moroccan cookbook, because there's one recipe, that one there, that I want to try, but I haven't been able to find lamb shanks anywhere. These are lamb shanks. They're about 1.5 pounds each, which is about 680 grams. A friend of mine called me from down in the city. He knew I wanted lamb shanks, and he saw them in a store. And he said, hey, they got them here. So I went down and I bought some. So that's what I want to do today. I want to make this recipe from my Moroccan cookbook that's called Lamb Shanks and Prune Tagine. It's a stew. A tagine is a stew. I love lamb. And I want to see what these lamb shanks are going to taste like, so this sounds like a good opportunity to experiment with lamb. So let's start cooking. Let's look at the lamb shank here. First of all, the bone is sawed through. I could, if I wanted to, take this piece of bone out if I needed to make this a little bit smaller to fit in my pan, but I've got a very large pan that it should be fine. If you've got a long bone here, you can clean the bone all off here. If it's all connected as one piece of bone, that's called Frenching it, where you take everything off the bone and you have a nice clean piece of bone on the end. I can't do that obviously because the bone is sawed through, so I'm just going to work with this as is, but like I said, I might, just for one of these, I might take out this one piece of bone just to see how it fits in my pan. I also have a lot of fat down here. I'm going to leave some of the fat on because it'll rend and give me some oil in the pan, but a lot of this extra fat I'm going to trim off. So to do that, I want to use a very sharp knife. Someone wrote to me a while back and said, why is it you never use shears when cutting up chickens? I told him I have shears, but shears just aren't as effective when you have a really sharp knife. And the only thing I could suspect was that he probably didn't have sharp knives in his kitchen. Some people don't. I have one friend that would bring me his knife every once in a while to sharpen it for him, because he knows I know how to keep my knives really sharp. Okay, I'm going to leave the rest of this on. Get some of this tissue off maybe. But that's how I'm going to trim mine. Not going to take a lot of this stuff off. Just, as I said, any fat in there, on there, will rend in the pan and give me some more oil to cook with. And I can skim the excess fat off later on before I actually make my stew. Okay, so you see what I'm doing here. I got the 3 others to do. Oh, I want to just try one thing here. What's it like taking this bone out? See, if this was all one piece of bone, I could scrape this bone clean and have a nice Frenched lamb shank here, but they sawed through this bone, and I think, I don't know for certain, but I think the reason why is so that people who have smaller pans can get the lamb shank into a pan to brown it and use it for a stew, braise it, and so forth. See, there's the value of a nice sharp knife. I can cut through everything and take that bone out. That is a boning knife, by the way. And that's that bone taken out. And that's a smaller piece of meat that would fit more easily in a pan. I think this is the only one I'm going to take the bone out of. I'm going to work with the others with the bone in, just to experiment and see how they work. I've got a large enameled cast iron pot on the stove. One person wrote to say, if you've got round burners, why do you use an oval pan? Well, in some cases it's just purely aesthetics. In some cases it's, I got big things to cook. That's cooking olive oil, a couple of tablespoons, and then I'm going to put in there a couple of tablespoons of, this is clarified butter. I prefer when I've got it to use clarified butter rather than whole butter, because whole butter has milk solids in it, which will burn. Now I want to lay the meat in there. Like so. I'm laying it away from my hand, so if there's any splashback, it won't get on my hand. And now I'm going to brown these well on both sides, and then the browning will be done. And I'm ready to turn this over. These have been browning for probably a good 5 minutes or so. See how nice that looks? That's a piece of string from that wrapping. Oh gosh, that looks just beautiful. I've been shifting these around a little bit. Oh, I really like the looks of that. That is nicely browned meat. I'm going to do this other side, and then I can take these out, set them aside, and begin making my stew. There are my lamb shanks browned. I've transferred them to a tray. Next, I'm going to start assembling the base for my stew. Next, I want to chop an onion. This is a fairly large onion as far as how big this onion is. I weighed it. It's 12 ounces, 340 grams. As I always say, if you've seen my other videos, you know I have my own way of chopping onions. I don't do it the way the chefs do it on TV. I think they take too many risks with their knife. I don't like drawing a really sharp knife, and my knife is sharp. I don't like drawing it toward my fingers. What they do is they cut down through the onion, then they cut in this way. They bring that knife toward their fingers. I always like to remind people that this is the cutting board, these are your fingers, don't get the two confused, and you won't get hurt. So what I do, again, cutting down to the cutting board, because that you can't hurt, cut it in half, and I'm going to do large pieces of onion because this is a stew, so I like bigger pieces in a stew. So I'm going to cut down to the cutting board, but not all the way through the onion, part way through, letting this root end hold everything together for me. You can see I'm just doing one chop in each direction, and then go across in rather a large chop, so that what I end up with is fairly large pieces of onion. See, I don't want a fine chop. I want a fairly large chop. So I have my other half to do. But there's my chopped onion. You might notice that I've taken some of the oil, most of the oil, out of this pan, but I left all that fond in, those delicious brown bits, because they're going to flavor our stew. So now I'm putting my onions in. I just want to saute these until they're tender and translucent, about 5 minutes. This is over medium heat. And the moisture from this, and especially when I add the liquids, will lift that fond up off the bottom of the pan. And that's good flavoring. Okay, at the risk of steaming up my camera lens here, I'm adding 1/2 cup of water. Look at that color. See that color? That's from the fond. See how it's lifted that fond up now? See, that's what's going to flavor it. You want 1.5 cups of water. I put in 1/2 cup because I want to put in 1 cup of my frozen chicken stock. If I can use chicken stock in place of water, I try to, because I think it adds a little more flavor. It even adds a little bit to the texture. I think of chicken stock as having like a velvety texture. All right, so I need to melt that in there. I'm also going to be adding about 1/8 of a teaspoon, a good pinch of saffron threads. And I have never tried it, but I imagine you could substitute if you wanted to. If you don't have saffron, you could probably substitute turmeric. So that's 1/8 of a teaspoon of saffron threads, about 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger. I have fresh ginger. So I'm going to add some fresh ginger to this pan. What I did, the reason why these were in little plastic packs, is one day I bought a lot of ginger and I just chopped the whole thing up fine. And then I sealed them in little plastic packs and put them in the freezer. So I would have ginger for a while. Okay, so that's my ginger. Now, you can put in a couple of cinnamon sticks if you want. I have them, but I'm just going to use about 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Put that in there. And then I have a sprig of coriander leaves. I have about 4 or 5 sprigs of coriander leaves that I've tied together with a string to make it easier to pull them out later on. And you can see this block of ice has already melted down quite a bit. So once this is melted, I'll be able to be ready to start returning my lamb to this pan. So now you can see my ice now has melted. My pot is beginning to come to the boil, so I'm going to add my lamb shanks back in there. Let's see. These are so big, I want to make sure I can fit them in there. There we go. That's good. Right there. And then I'm going to cover this, and I'm going to reduce my heat to low. And I'm going to cook that for 1 hour. But I'm going to check it every once in a while to see what the liquid level is doing. If the liquid is boiling off, then I'm going to add more chicken stock or water to the pot. I need the zest from either a whole lemon if it's small, or if you have a big lemon like that one, 1/2 lemon. And rather than using a microplane grater to grate off the zest, I want to take long strips of this lemon peel. But that's giving me too much of the pith. However, I'm not too worried about that for this particular dish, because a little bit of bitterness is not going to be a bad thing. Right, and I'm not absolutely every molecule off, as you can see. But enough. So I have these strips. And then I could put them in that way, but I don't want to put them that way. The original recipe calls for using wide strips. But I'm going to cut them lengthwise into a julienne. And I think that would be better. So there's my zest. And I can't imagine tossing a lemon out when I've got a nice fresh ripe lemon here. So I'm going to put some of the lemon juice in my tagine. This isn't a part of the original recipe, but I've got it here, and I really like the flavor of lemon. In some dishes, I think it just brightens the flavor up a little bit. Here I go. I think I got enough in the bowl and not on the counter. So that's the juice of one small lemon. Okay, I'm going to clean up my mess here, and I'll be ready to add this to my tagine. Ready now to add my lemon zest and the lemon juice. I want to stir that in there. I did check this every 15 minutes. As you can see, the liquid did not boil dry. And every time I checked it, I turned these pieces over. Just they would kind of braise evenly in that liquid. Okay, so my lemon zest now is in there. Put the lid back on, set the timer for 30 minutes again. Let that simmer over low heat for another 30 minutes. Just getting ready to add the last of my ingredients here. We're coming down to the final 30 minutes of cooking time. This is 2 tablespoons of honey. This is just regular clover honey. And then what I have here is, the recipe said 1 1/3 cups, but how do you measure 1 1/3 cups? This is 11 ounces or 300 grams of pitted prunes. As I said, this was a lamb, shank, and prune tagine. So I want to push those down into my liquid. All right, bring this back up to the boil again. And I'm going to bring this, as I said, bring it up to the boil. I'm going to cover this and then cook it for another 30 minutes. In the meantime, I need to lightly toast some sesame seeds. To toast my sesame seeds, I have a small stainless steel skillet here. And I just want to toast these lightly over this heat. These will toast quickly because they're so small. And then as soon as I get some color to them, I'm going to take them out of the pan. You can see them coloring already. I'm going to transfer them immediately to a stainless steel bowl. If I leave them in this pan, which is hot, they'll scorch. See how they've changed color? That's done. Get them off the heat into a stainless steel bowl. My sesame seeds are done. Okay, to plate this now. I did adjust the seasoning for the liquid in the bottom of the pan. I took out some of the meat, or actually just pushed it aside, and then adjusted it for salt. That is a nice big piece of lamb. I'm amazed at how large that is. And let's see if I can do this without making a mess. Get some of my juices from the bottom of this. I did taste this, by the way, when I was tasting it for the salt. And it's got a very almost a sharp flavor. It's actually very, very good. One more. All right, there's my juices from the pan. I'm going to put a little bit of black pepper, just a tiny bit, and some salt on the meat because I think the meat's going to need it. I didn't salt the meat in advance. It's kind of no point since it was going to cook in a lot of broth the whole time. And then to finish it, garnish with a sprinkle of toasted sesame seeds. There it is. Last step is to see how good that tastes. Okay, first of all, that is a lot of food. I bought the 4 largest shanks they had, lamb shanks. I want to taste one of the prunes with the sauce. Very nice flavor. That is good. And now a piece of my lamb with the sauce. Tender. Melt in your mouth. So excuse me. What is this, a late lunch or an early dinner? Whatever. I'm going to go enjoy my lamb shank and prune tagine. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit the White Trash Cooking website and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.